Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connections, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello and welcome to another episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. Today I have Don Van Splunteren with me, a dynamic multicultural Fortune 500 executive that pretty much is a Pandora's box. Besides being an electronics engineer, he has a bachelor in arts in music with a master in guitar and jazz improvisation. He also has a master's in business administration. He speaks 5 languages, has lived in several countries, so imagine the experiences he's going to bring to the table. Besides everything I've said, he's very special to me because he is my husband of 10 years. Welcome, Don, to the show.
Hello, Letty. I'm glad to be on your show.
Well, you better. This was a special favor requested, so I'm happy you're making this happen. I know you're a very busy man. For those of you that are not familiar with what my hubby does, which probably is most of you, he's the global VP of sales of one of the fastest growing telecom infrastructure companies and has a very demanding job. And part of the reason, Don, why I thought you would be a fantastic guest is because we struggled not only as a couple, as parents, as husband and wife, but as an executives. We've had many conversations where we like to venture out with our philosophy hats and wonder, like what is life all about. And you're a very deep person. Everybody that knows you knows this. You have a theory for everything. And so I wanted you to share some of those brilliant theories with my audience. But let's start at the beginning. You have such an interesting background. I always say that a book could be written about your family. The background that you have, it's really picture worth. And so let's start. Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, and who was Don as a kid.
Okay, well, Don was born in Tilburg, a city in the south of the Netherlands, also called Holland, a country in Western Europe. And I have one older brother, of course, my parents, and we were a family of 4. And we had a very easy first couple of years of my life. My dad was working, my mom was more sort of a stay-at-home mom for the first years, and I had a great brother, which was and is 1.5 years older than I. And quickly, after about 3-4 years, we moved to Belgium, which is a country neighboring the Netherlands. And actually, where we moved was literally less than an hour away from where I lived in Tilburg. And we lived there for a couple of years as well. And as I was growing up in Holland and Belgium, and after Belgium, we went back to Holland. Those first, let's say, child years, a lot of Dutch kids like to play soccer. It's kind of the national sport. So I was a kid, played some soccer and played some tennis and active outdoor life in the summer and the fall and the autumn, or I should say spring, and then in the winter not so much. But it was all good, and it was a great era. My parents, my father was an entrepreneur, so he had at that time he had a travel business, so we traveled a lot. We traveled across Europe, pretty much every country you could imagine. Most of the time driving around in a car from A to B, and as a matter of fact, my dad took it upon himself to take a 100-day trip in a caravan across Europe and Africa, and that was kind of the Dutch style, explorer style lifestyle that for the first 10 15 years, I would say, I lived with my family, and were great years. We did move around quite a lot, even in Holland. Like I said, we went to Belgium and back to Holland, and a different house, a different school, a different elementary school, and a high school, which is the Dutch equivalent of the middle school, and then you have a high school. But a lot of moving around, even within Holland. But clearly, then I think something that really changed my life a lot was that my parents decided to move to Venezuela. So that's definitely a part I'm sure I'll expand upon on some other parts of this conversation.
Okay, no, and that's interesting, and we are not jumping ahead, but I'm Venezuelan for those of you that don't know. So the one thing that people think immediately assume when they meet us is that A, you speak Spanish because you married a Venezuelan, and B, that you were in Venezuela and that's where we met. But that's not the case at all. We met in the US, but let's save that for a little bit later on. Why don't you share with us about your grandparents and their fascinating story of where your dad was born? Because I think it's important in defining who you became later and some of the, let's say, maybe challenges or issues you have had to deal with in terms of stay true of who you are, of your heritage, and keep connecting to your background.
Well, so on my mother's side, my grandparents were from the same area where I was born in Tilburg, the province of North Brabant in Holland. And so not much to tell there, but clearly on my father's side, that's where all the interesting stories are. And my father was born in Indonesia, which is a large island, archipelago island country in Asia, of course. And he was born there during the World War II, as was my mom, but in Holland. But my father was born in Indonesia. And the interesting part of that is that at the time of World War II, Indonesia was invaded by the Japanese army, as they had invaded large parts of the Pacific and Asia. And so my grandparents, who were living there at the time in Indonesia, they got caught in the middle of that war. They got captured by the Japanese and put in concentration camps. And so they separated basically my grandparents. My grandfather went to a camp of forced labor and had to work there for, I think, about 4 years for the Japanese in mines and forced labor in general. And my grandma, with her first two daughters, my aunts, moved into a separate camp where also they had to work and do some more manual labor. But there were also kids involved. And my father was actually born in the concentration camp. So he was, born in Indonesia in a concentration camp, um, pretty much with the situation that led to malnutrition of most people, obviously, in the camp. And my father was not an exception as a little baby. So as for the first 4 years, my dad lived there, as did my aunts and my grandma. But when the war finished, finally, Indonesia found itself in the turmoil of a civil war, or actually, yeah, a civil war, and basically the whole family had to leave Indonesia and returned to Holland. At least my granddad returned to Holland. He was from Holland, born and raised in Holland. He was on an expat job in Indonesia, but my father was born in Indonesia, and so were my aunts. So they went to Holland, and clearly the traumatic experience for both my grandma and my grandfather, and of course the kids as well, especially the older aunts, was a huge imprint and changed a lot of what the future would be for the family Van Splunteren, because all of them got affected emotionally and psychologically by those events. And so they returned to Holland, and basically my grandfather decided to move from the Holland again to other places in the world, and he decided in the 1950s to move to Venezuela. As a matter of fact, the whole family, my grandparents and my mom and my uncles and aunts, I'm sorry, my dad and my uncle and aunts, they all went to Venezuela. And they lived there together for about a year and a half. but then the family dismantled just because of all the things that had happened to them, and they returned to Holland, with the exception of my grandfather, who stayed in Venezuela. So yeah, it's clearly a hard beginning for my dad in his life, and the whole history kind of changed the way the whole family, Van Splunteren, looked at immigration, and and the family basically got all dispersed around the world after that when the kids grew up, and that's part of why I think I've been also moving around quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. By listening to that, it's hard to understand for someone that, say, for me, I do come from immigrant parents, and my parents also left Italy after the Second World War and went to Venezuela. But once they settled there, I lived in the same house pretty much all my childhood, over 20 years, until I went to the US and went to one school. So we always have this conversation in terms of even what we want for our kids, and we both come from such a different background in that sense, where you were moving a lot and were flexible, or are flexible and adaptable more so than me, that come from a background from where I've had a lot of stability and I know what to expect. And I find that aspect fascinated, because when you talk about connecting to who you are, or something that really makes you feel that, yeah, this is me, I probably can say that maybe for someone like me it's easier. Everything is more expected than for you, that we're a little bit here, a little bit there, but at the same time, and we've spoken about that, the connections are different. And this is why I think so many listeners could relate to your story, that those that haven't had that stability, or maybe were moving a lot and change was the constant in their lives. So, for what I understand, you were 15 and then your dad felt the need, for whatever reason, while his dad was in Venezuela, to go there. So he's in Holland, you're all in Holland, and then the decision was made, we are all moving to Venezuela, correct?
Yep, that's correct. And one day my father and mom said, "Hey, we're going to move to Venezuela," and so that was quite of a kind of a shock at 15. I think as most kids at that age, it's a pretty tough age as it is. 15, you're kind of finding out who you are and where you belong and who you belong with, and we moved to Venezuela, a totally different country from many aspects. Obviously, culturally, Holland is a Western European country, a very liberal country, and very well developed country. And we moved to Venezuela, which it was is a beautiful country, but clearly it was a totally different culture, much more conservative, and the level of development, way different than from Holland. And so, yeah, without speaking the language either, we didn't speak Spanish, obviously. So when we arrived there, it was kind of a big change for us, especially for my brother and I, of course. My brother, he was 16, almost 17. I was 15. So yeah, it was definitely a huge change, and clearly at the beginning it was hard to adapt, because in first place of the language, and second place you didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends at the beginning, and we were going from school to school because we didn't speak Spanish. We first went to an international school, and we spent there about 6 months, and then didn't work out. They put us in a German school because we do learn German in high school in Holland. So my German and my brother's German was pretty decent, and that didn't work out that well either. And after that, my parents decided, well, just go to Spanish school, and got to learn Spanish the hard way. And quite frankly, it ended up being the easy way. I think the best way to learn a language is by being immersed in it. And at a school, I guess you have no other option than try to learn. And so yeah, that's how we got to Venezuela. It was clearly at the beginning a very tough experience, but as time progressed, Venezuela is a very beautiful country and has also many many nice things. And of course, not to forget the beautiful Venezuelan women who are the leaders in the Miss Universe contest. So it was a great time in Venezuela. After well,
Yeah, that's the only thing we do have going for us. I always say we don't have soccer World Cups, we don't have F1 racers, but we do have the title as the most Miss Universe and Miss World. So that's a good thing. So you're back there, you're 15. What did you take from your childhood, or what tools did you have to cope with that change and to remain, let's say, sane in where everyone I just can imagine you're looking around, everything is different. Everywhere you look, everything is different, the language is different. So what did younger Don did in those days, besides of course going to all sorts of different schools and trying to make friends? Did you have a special place or a special activity that helped you through those hard times?
well, I think at the beginning it was like, well, this is temporary. At the beginning it was like, well, this is a vacation. So it doesn't settle in at the beginning, and you're just like, yeah, on a vacation mode, and of course, at the beginning, you're even not even trying to make friends because it's almost like, well, this is, temporary anyway, and you don't speak the language, so, we'll just return to Holland quickly. But that didn't happen, and so one of the things I picked up early on was I started playing guitar, and it was really great. It was a hobby that you could do on your own. You didn't need friends initially. Later on, in bands, of course, and that was very helpful. But to start playing, it was really great. And one of the things that always kept me going was, well, Holland is right there, and that was the thing that was my root. And even though I lived in Belgium, and also I had lived a year in Curacao before coming to Venezuela. Between Holland and Venezuela, there was 1 year of Curacao really. But yeah, the one constant was, it's Holland, and that's where I grew up, and that's where my friends were, and all my family, and my uncles and aunts and cousins were there, and so that was kind of, it was a lot of, well, that's who I am, and that's kind of became my north, my compass. Well, I'm going to go back to Holland, and then everything's going to be fine, and that kept me kind of going, and I would even kind of dream and almost believe that, well, across this beautiful mountain range that is in Caracas, Venezuela, called El Avila, just across that big mountain, that's where Holland is, and it's not that far away. And that kept me going for a while. And for a couple of years, it was really tough. But then I learned the language and the culture. I started to adapt some of the things of the culture and like some things, and maybe not like so many others. But ultimately, I had a really great time in Venezuela.
It's always good to hear that my people treated you good at that time. But I know it's a conversation we have often in terms of your experience there, and I can only imagine that it wasn't easy. Although a blonde guy, blue-eyed, getting 15 to Venezuela, I know that the girls definitely would be looking because you were totally different from what we were used to. In any case, then you go to university in Venezuela. You graduate from electronics engineer. Your brother had gone already, and you had an incentive to go back because, as you said, Holland was your north. So you did make it back.
Yeah, so I lived in Venezuela for 8 years, and indeed, even though I had planned to go back earlier, like once I graduated high school, for several reasons. It's a long story, but I decided to stay and finish university there, and that was definitely the best experience in Venezuela, was going to the university there. And I started working after graduating at Procter& and Gamble, my first real job. I had a great job there, but there was this calling, like I want to go back to Holland, and I hadn't been for 8 years. So, you leave as a 15-year-old, now you're 23-year-old, you've become a man. young man, and from a boy to a young man, and yeah, I wanted to go back to Holland. Just I was so curious, like wow, all these 8 years, Holland was the thing on my mind. That's who I am. That's where I'm from. That's me. And that's where my brother was, and that's where my family was. So I took leave of absence from Procter& and Gamble, supposedly for 6 months, but ended up staying. I went back to Holland and basically came back, and yeah, things were really nice there. And my brother was playing music as well. He played bass, and I played guitar, and he was in some bands. And by that time, I was playing pretty well, and so I got into in one band and another band, and before I knew it, I was playing around Holland and then across Europe. And at some point, I had to call Procter and Gamble, say, guys, I don't think I'll be coming back to Venezuela or to Procter and Gamble. So thank you so much. And so I decided to test the music industry for a while. And one of the things that definitely I've always been is curious and always looking to learn new things. And I decided, wow, I want to learn more about music. I had learned to play guitar on my own, and I had the opportunity to start a whole new study, a Bachelor of Arts in guitar, in music for guitar, and I decided to do that. And so, as I was playing and basically living off music, I was also studying music and Bachelor of Arts in music for guitar, improvised music. So, wow, there you go from being an electronics engineer working in Procter& and Gamble to being a musician trying to get by, and while I was studying also music. So a big change there for sure, but it was a great era.
And for any of you that's curious, Don has a musician page on Facebook called Don Van, so make sure you check it out and like it. But to me, what's interesting of your story is that you kind of did what was expected of you. I'm sure you liked engineering back then, but for what you've shared here and in our conversations, it was more, it made sense. You went into engineering, you got it done, and then you had been, let's say, playing around with music and had a passion for it. And then one day you decided that that was your interest at that time, and then you just give up a career in Procter and Gamble and just pursue music. And that to me, it's something already that showcase at a very young age that that you weren't afraid of losing something to gain something. And the music has ever since become a very or been a very important part of who you are. But it's also true that in 8 years, and then you'll share with us what happened, but you did it. And many times when people ask you like, why don't you have like a long career in music? And what's your answer to that?
Well, I think the fact of change and searching for new things and learning new things is a big driver in what I do and what I like to do, what keeps me motivated. And I think in part due to those many changes during my early childhood and then later in my adult adolescence, it kind of became a habit of having change. It's like, in those 8 years that I lived in Venezuela, I think I lived in 7 different houses or maybe 8 different houses. I went to 5 different schools, maybe more. I need to count again. But and with that in Holland, I've gone so many schools. At some point, change becomes an ingredient for life. So you indeed become not afraid of letting go of stuff and starting all over again with something new. And so when I did and left the engineering career at Procter& and Gamble for music, yeah, this was really fearless. I mean, it's just something that came totally natural, and it was driven in large part because music was a very important part of my life. It wasn't planned. I went to Holland really for a long vacation and to see my family and travel Europe, but it came about, and it felt right, and I was like, hey, this is something I can do now. Do music is something that's very important to me, and it's something that maybe later in my life, once I'm further ahead in maybe an electronics career, I won't be able to do. So why not do it? Of course, I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. That provides a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, also having the mental freedom to make those choices and basically leave a very well-paying job behind at Procter& Gamble and go figure out how to live from music, which is clearly not an easy thing to do.
But you did it, and you did it for 8 years, and then you decided what?
Yeah, so I graduated the Bachelors in Arts for Music. I was playing a lot of music at the time, playing around 150 times a year. But at some point, you also realize, like, okay, well, what do I like about music? And what am I really doing? I'm living off music. And basically, what I found was that I was most of the time, 90% of the time, I was playing music, which was really not the music that I wanted to play, but just I had to kind of play to get by economically and live off. So, and it kind of again the driver for change came again. Like, yeah, this has been a long while doing the same thing, music, and yeah, wow, how something exciting, might be around the corner. And that's when the opportunity came to go to the U.S. At the time, my parents were living in the U.S., which was very helpful. And initially, I thought, well, I'm going to move to the U.S. and try my musical career there. But very, very quickly, I realized there were other things that I wanted to do, and that the right time had come to go back to other passions in my life, which were, technology and engineering, and put my electronics engineering degree to work. So I decided to basically cut my long hair that I had at the time and go and find a job, which I did find, and that's how I came to the U.S.
And it was a very long hair. I have never had my hair as long as you did. So, but you said something that to me is so powerful. You pursued your dream or one of your dreams, and you went for music. And after a while, you said you make the realization that even within that passion, within that dream, you had to do things you didn't like, basically. You had to play music that didn't excite you. And I believe that that's the source of unhappiness in so many people I talk to and myself. I mean, I always say that I get to do a lot of the stuff in my office that I don't like doing at all. And I get to do very little of the stuff I like doing. And it's always a struggle on how do we do more of what we enjoy so that we don't start, um, how would you say, rejecting even the very thing that we like doing. And you were very brave because you recognized that probably, yes, I like music, but if I want to keep liking it, I probably have to quit it, walk away from it until the point I can start enjoying it again because I can play what I want and I can do it on my own terms. And what I believe is a lot of people don't pursue their dreams just for the fear of being disappointed by the dream. Once you achieve the dream, once you become that musician, once you learn to play the guitar, which is obviously like the dream of half the men I know, it's like I wish I could play the guitar. And then they hear you playing, and everybody admires how you play, and they say, "Oh my God, it's so cool that Don plays like that." And that they idolize, I think, what that guitar playing is. It's not so much the playing the guitar, it's what it represents. It's the, I think, the rocker lifestyle and all that. Yet you had it and you gave it up to go back to the US, cut your hair, and went back into engineering.
Yes. Well, it's a
So
famous,
that's very powerful.
yes, I mean, it's a famous saying. It's the point of a journey is not to arrive. And so it's sometimes it is more about the journey. And sometimes you arrive at the point like, okay, now is this journey over? And so you want to continue a journey. And for me, for sure, it's that journey that really counts. And I hope to continue to have a long, very long journey.
Well, that's very exciting. And I hope you do continue having a very, very long journey for me and for our kids.
Yes.
So you're in Miami, now you're with your parents, and you go back into, let's call it corporate America, in which you have done very well because now you're global VP of sales of a fantastic growing company. So now you're a married man and you have two kids. What would you say are the key components of having a fulfilled life if you feel you have one, or how are you walking towards getting a fulfilled life?
So the journey, being able to continue a journey now, not only as an individual, but as a husband and wife, and then of course with two kids, it is definitely a journey, and it's definitely full of change. And it's exactly, what I like is that, it's all but the same. As the family life is all but stable, all but boring. It's not easy, but it's a path, it's a journey, right? And from having two little babies to hopefully having some great, happy, and healthy adults in some years, it's a journey on its own. So um, that is kind of the big motivation that keeps me going, because obviously, once you have a family, there's certain things you need to let go in order to be able to move on to certain next phases. And clearly, I've not been afraid to let go of things before, and and that's what I did when when we met and we got married, and now we have kids. The same thing, you leave things, certain things you let them go, because you're getting a new chapter of your journey. And so this chapter happens to be a super fantastic one, super inspiring one that has surpassed all of my expectations about being a husband and father. So, um, and then there will be another chapters to come for sure.
Well, I have to agree on that one for sure. So that's a handful. And the one thing I'd like to share with the audience here, and most people don't believe this about us, and we've been joking around about doing a publicity because when we were both single and looking, we both had a very busy life. We were both traveling probably for work 80 to 90% of our times. And, meeting people was really hard. And anybody that knows me knows I'm quite conservative person. But you know what? This little thing called Match.com was out there. And I say, if you want something, you have to pursue it. And, let's just try this thing. And little did I know I was going to find a Dutch man who lived in Venezuela who had so much in common with me that I couldn't even imagine. And it ended up that I now have two kids with a guy I met online. Isn't that amazing?
Quite amazing indeed.
And we both joke around this, and we share this story mostly because we want to inspire other people that has met us. And every time we get that question of where did you meet? And we say online, people laugh and say, no, no, really, where did you meet? And then we say, really, that's where we met. And it's so amazing that after 14 years of that moment, people still don't believe it. And the purpose of this podcast, in a way, is to follow your gut feeling and to commit to what you want to happen in your life, and to remember who you are and what you want. And being in a family was something that we both wanted. And in the craziness of the lives we led, we found the time to just make it happen in the most unbelievable way. So, having said that, so Don, I mean, you've shared so many interesting things that the last question I have for you, and it's how I end all my interviews, is if you can share with us, what do you believe is the essence of you, or let's say what makes you tick, which is a very appropriate question for a musician?
Well, I think the biggest driver for decisions that I've made in my life, and the behaviors, and for good or better or worse, I think ultimately they do come from a place of curiosity to learn more, to explore, to express, and I think all these things together are some sort of need for change. The change that, stability, or no, stability is not the word I'm looking for, but definitely status quo is not something that I look for. I like change. I like things to evolve. I like the unknown that the future holds, and to explore that unknown is very exciting, and that's kind of what drives me every day to go to work and find out new things, how to do things in a better way, and how to work with people in better ways, and add value to everything that I do. The same in the family, how do we improve as parents? How do we help our kids become better people, better persons, and how do we help them with their challenges and all the things they need to do? So yeah, I think what makes me tick, if I would have to summarize it, is mostly the curiosity of the unknown that drives and pushes myself forward in a quest of becoming a better person and a better father and a better husband.
That's great. And just as a bonus thing, if you had 1 hour to be anywhere to find peace, where would it be?
Well, it would be a place where I can disconnect and try to connect to that essence. And for me, the easiest way is to be somewhere in a place like a studio, music studio, with a great guitar, some recording gear, and just letting music pass through the fingers into the recording studio and create something. Yeah, that's an experience that I cherish, and it really helps me connect to the essence of the universe. Something. It's a place where you just cannot get unless, in my case, unless you're totally disconnected, totally relaxed, and music is such a channel to get to that place.
Wow, that's really full circle for me for the purpose of this podcast. It wasn't rehearsed, but thank you. It served the purpose very well. I know that's a place for you because I know where you go, where you need to be you, and you're definitely a very different person when you are connected to that source. And yeah, that's the purpose for you listening out there. Just try to focus in what is that moves you, what is that connects you to that source. And it has been a fantastic time with you, Don. I'm glad that I'll have hopefully many more like these conversations.
Thank you, Letty. It's been a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you so much. And until the next time.